Hi, I'm FIDE Master Livy Cherbulenko, and if you seriously analyze the openings of people rated anywhere between 8,000 and 2,000, the following is a Caro-Kann game played between 1741 versus 1417. Let's start. Alright, so e4, c6, d4, d5. Okay, so the Caro-Kann defense. White takes the exchanged variation, okay. Some other moves would be e5, the advanced or the closed variations, knight c3, simply defending the pawn. But okay, ed is fine. ed, cd, bishop d3. Yeah, this is a great diagonal for the bishop, so that's a fine move. Knight f6, black develops the knight. Knight f3, white develops his kingside knight. e6. Okay, so this is the first inaccuracy. Why would black play e6 and black his own bishop? Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. So a much better move would be to maybe first move the knight, let's say maybe. Knight choose e6. Let's say white plays c3 to strengthen the knight, the pawn, sorry. And then black can play bishop g4. We first put the bishop outside the chain, and then we can play e6 and close the chain, and then develop the other bishop driver, d6 or e7, and then castle, and then black is fine. But we always put our bishop outside the chain first, then we play e6. If you know the French defense, which is e4, e6, d4, d5, in the French defense, black's worst piece is the c8 bishop. By definition, because black plays e6, d5 in the French defense, and when the c8 bishop is blocked. The Caro-Kann, when we play c6, d5, the Caro-Kann is an improved French defense. Why? Because in the Caro-Kann you don't yet play e6, you play c6, d5, then you can put the bishop outside the chain and then play e6. So that's why the Caro-Kann is basically, you can think of it like the improved French, alright? So this is what black should play, right? Knight c6, bishop g4, like I said, and then e6, and then this bishop is worse than either the knight or the bishop. It's worse, yeah, it's just worse. So I mean, black can either take the knight on f3, and that would be a good trade for black, because if white's knight goes through e5, that's a centralized knight. Then a centralized knight on e5 is much better than black's light square bishop, okay? So that's one way. Or another way, black can exchange, maybe even better actually, exchange against white's light square bishop. That's an even better idea actually. So that would be bishop h5, bishop h5, bishop g6, and exchange. Why? Because white's d3 bishop in these kind of positions is white's key piece to attack h7. In these kind of positions, white attacks on the king side, specifically h7, and the d3 bishop is the key attacking piece. Without the d3 bishop, there is no attack, okay, or much more difficult to perform, okay, the attack. That's why if black can exchange this key piece of white, black will be fine. In fact, black will probably have the advantage, because white's advantage is what? Attack on the king side. But white also has some downsides, like for example, if white no longer has this light square bishop, then he will have chronically weak light squares like c4, e4, you know, f5, and then black will put his knights, for example, on those weak light squares, and white won't have a guardian to defend those. That's one. Two, black has a long-term strategical plan, which is rook b8 eventually, or maybe a6, right, and then b5, b4, which is called pawn minority attack, because this c3 pawn is a hook that helps black make pawn breaks through it and open up files and create weaknesses. So this is black's best bet, okay? Rook b8, b5, b4, and then whatever white does, you know, it will create a weakness on white's queen side. So for white to compensate it, white needs to attack on the king side, because if white does not attack on the king side, long term he might be worse on the queen side due to b5, b4. But if black manages to trade these bishops, it will be much more difficult, you know. So white needs to be very intricate, you know, to avoid this exchange, okay? So, or even if black cannot play bishop h5, g6 for whatever reason, and we just take the knight on f3, that's still a good trade for black, because again, the knight on e5 is better than black's light square bishop. So this is absolutely key to understand. So that's why e6 is such a mistake, because I mean, it just blocks the bishop. So it's so bad, so bad. Already white has initiative. Yeah, castles, that's fine. Another move would be to develop the other bishop, bishop f4, I would say. Develop the other bishop, so we have these two nice diagonals. And if black plays bishop d6, challenging our bishop, typically the best response is not to take. You wanna keep the tension. If you take, you release the tension, and then you also help black develop the queen through d6, right? Activate the queen, then maybe knight c6, and they control now more of the e5 square. It's really key to control the e5 square. If we take on d6, queen takes d6, we help them get his queen through d6 and have more control over e5 square. So why would we do it? The best response is typically bishop g3, keeping the tension. Now, one idea is that if black takes, then we go hg and we open up our rook. Don't look at these double pawns, it's not relevant. Much more relevant in these kind of positions is that you open up your rook. And so when black castles in the future, for example, it will be, I mean, super dangerous for black, right? Because white has huge pressure on the h file. They can play pawn c3, queen c2, put even more pressure. There's also knight g5 edges. There's also, by the way, edges like g4, g5. Do you see this is an advantage? Our double pawn. We push. That's another rule of thumb. You always push the double pawn. You always push the double pawn. So g4, g5. If they take knight takes g4, we take on h7. If we don't take on g4, we just play g5, right? So either way is great for white, right? So that's like the typical response, you know, bishop g3. And if they don't take on g3, they wait for us to castle, which is a smart idea for black. It's still fine. You can still castle. That's fine. Let them take and then play hg. That's also fine. That's also fine. Okay. But yeah, this is probably what I'd recommend. Bishop f4. Okay, castles. Yeah, do you see? Because this way, already black played first bishop d6 and you can play bishop f4, which this is a very good diagonal. Very good diagonal. So yeah, that's the downside. h3. Now this is a huge mistake. This is such a waste of time. Why play h3? Why play h3? I mean, what, knight g4? First of all, h2 is guarded. Knight g4 is not even a threat. h2 is guarded by the f3 knight. And even if it was a threat, even if h2 was not defended, I mean, you could wait for knight g4 first and then play h3 with tempo. We play h3 with tempo. So that's such a waste of time, absolute waste of time. In the opening, true most fundamental principles are king safety, meaning true castle, and true minor piece development. Minor piece development. These are the true fundamental principles. And maybe you could also add pawn center, right? Fighting for the pawn center, trying to create a pawn center if you can. Yeah, but no, h3, complete waste of time. What else could white play? Well, different ideas. c3, for example, right? c3, typical idea. One, strengthening the d4 pawn, which this is the most important function. Strengthening our key d4 pawn, which is our pawn center. And two, potentially when black plays knight e6, defending against knight b4 annoying stuff. Attacking our key piece, you know. So it's also kind of a prophylactical idea, okay. Maybe also potentially some queen c2, attacking on h7, or bishop c2, queen d3, who knows, right? Attacking on h7. But first is to defend the pawn on d4. That'd be one idea, you know. Maybe rook e1, improving the rook, putting the rook on a semi-open e file, controlling the e5 even more, which e5 is very key that we control, as I said. So that would be another idea. Now, because we cannot put the bishop on f4, we can play bishop g5 and pin the knight. This is also not bad, right? Pin the knight. And if we play h6, simply bishop h4. And then actually, again, we can play bishop g3. Yes, we wasted maybe one tempo, because we did not play bishop f4, g3, but we play bishop g5, h4, g3. But on the other hand, black also played h6 and wasted a tempo. That is if they do play h6. Because if they don't play h6, then you have to, you know, literally waste the tempo, right? Play bishop h4, bishop g3. If they play h6, you wasted the tempo on bishop g5, they wasted the tempo on h6. So maybe it's not that bad. But yeah, this would be an idea. This is actually a typical idea, right? Typical idea, bishop g5. If you like, you did not manage to play bishop f4 in the first place, you play bishop g5 here and here, right? And this is a good strategical trade. Now, why is this a good strategical trade? Because the same way that black's c8 bishop is so bad that is restricted by his own pawns, the same way is this bishop our worst piece. Because if you look at white's pawns, soon we'll also play c3, it will be, even though it is outside the chain, not inside but outside the chain, it is still on the same color as most of our pawns. So although it is more active, but strategically it's still bad. it is still bad, okay? So that's one reason we exchange this bishop, because it's a worse bishop, versus if you look at black's dark square bishop, it is on the opposite color than most of his pawns. So it's a good bishop. So we trade our bad bishop versus his good bishop. But there's also the second reason. The second reason is black's dark squares, because black put all his pawns or most of his pawns on light squares like f7, e6, d5. He has automatically weak dark squares like c5, e5, right? And the bishop on d6 guards those squares. So we wanna always trade our points guardians of weak squares. So after bishop g3 we trade the bishop, then black will have chronically weak dark squares. And then in the future, when you put a knight on c5, when you put a knight on e5, black won't have a bishop to take those pieces. So that's why it's absolutely key to trade, try to trade these bishops. So this would be another great idea for white. But yeah, h3, absolute waste of time. Absolute waste of time. And I'll tell you actually one more very advanced reason why h3 is so bad, and, besides the fact that it wastes time. The most advanced reason why this move is so bad is because of this. One of white's main idea of attack, okay, maybe I'll even like show you actually. So it's basically something like, let's say like here, and let's say the castle, we play f4, strengthening this knight. Let's say, I don't know, knight c6, pawn to c3, they make whatever move, rook e8, looks logical, right? And then here's the point: the best idea in these kind of positions for white to attack effectively black's king is a heavy piece lift through h3. So that would be, for example, queen f3. Let's say we make some move, bishop d7, and then queen h3. This is the best square for the queen in these kind of positions. The best square. Like, don't get it twisted. Although it looks weird in the corner, this is the best square. And it's very difficult for black to play here. Next, g4, g5 comes. Lots of stuff come, you know. You're simply attacking the knight. The knight goes, and then we take on h7. So this is super dangerous for black. Very dangerous, you know. So this is why we never play h3 in these kind of positions. Always leave h3 for the queen most of the time, or sometimes we also play, you know, rook f3 and then rook h3, you know, and again attacking h7 is also fine, again g4, g5. But, you know, the queen is even more dangerous, right? So I'd say play queen f3, queen h3. But also maybe even before you play queen h3, I'd say maybe like, ideally maybe develop the bishop to e3 and then play knight b2 to control e4. It's very key that you control e4, because when you play queen h3, you don't want black to play knight e4 and then f5, oops, and then blockade this bishop forever. Because our whole advantage is this diagonal. If black can play knight e4 and then play f5 and strengthen his knight on e4, they would forever block our bishop, and our attack would stop in its tracks, right? So that's why it's key that you first control e4, maybe play bishop e3, knight b2, control e4, and then play queen h3. But this is why it's absolutely key that we leave, you know, the h3 square, you know, but we don't play h3. We leave it for our heavy pieces, especially the queen, right? So a huge waste of time. Okay, castles, bishop g5, another thing. Now already bishop g5 is not as effective. Why? It's still fine, but when black plays, okay, yeah, we did play h6, bishop h4. If we at some point need to play bishop g3 and they take, now we'll have to take fg, which may be not the most optimal. Typically we want to take towards the center. Now there is one upside to fg. It opens up our rook, so we'll have maybe some pressure on the f file. But I mean, it's not clear if that pressure is enough. But that could be an upside, right? Pressure on the f file. But I'm just saying, typically you want to play hg towards the center. So that could be one potential downside of h3, okay? And another, I mean, besides all the other downsides. Okay, here, pawn to c3 makes sense. Rook e8, okay. Knight bd2, that's fine. I mean, rook e1 would be also another move, right? You know, trying to control the e5 square. But okay, knight bd2, e5, okay. I mean, I see. Black, I mean, wants to do something to activate this bishop, to play actively in the center, because black realizes, but if he does nothing, white will play like here, rook e1, maybe queen e2, maybe knight e5, maybe pawn f4, shank the knight on e5, and then have a very strong outpost on e5, and then again try to attack on the king side, maybe even with g4, g5, you know, stuff like that, right? maybe even some rook lift, not show h3, but at least show g3, stuff like that. So black realizes that he needs to be active in the center. Otherwise, if white gets a strong hold on e5, it's just basically over for black, right? So that's why black plays e5, but it does not come without downsides, because let's see. So white took, pam, 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 rook e1. Okay, that's fine. Or could have played knight f3 first, let's say, also fine, right? And then rook e1, or rook e1 first is also good, because why? Now if black moves the bishop, and actually the next move is knight f3 threat, and the point is what, that after black moves the bishop, we can take on e8, then we can take the knight, oops, because we simply take the queen, and if we take the queen, then we take the knight on f6, gf, and we completely damage black's king's defense, you know, and black will be much worse. And so already black is worse, although white no longer has this like stronghold on e5 and like kingside attack, but we traded that advantage for another advantage, which is better development, and black has a weak isolated pawn on d5, so that's a forever weakness, plus automatically by definition a weak d4, the square right in front of it, weak d4 outpost, which white will put later a knight to, right, like a knight on knight f3, and then knight d4 eventually, and so this is a forever great outpost for white's pieces, and d5 is a forever weak pawn for black, plus also a very poor c8 bishop, which has no moves, against a very good d3 bishop, which is on a very good central square that controls two diagonals simultaneously. So we can conclude that white here has a good advantage in a risk-free position. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.